Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Bloomerang Academy today. My name's Scott. I'm a customer support team lead here at Bloomerang. I've been here for just over 2 years now. I actually just celebrated my 2 year here in September. Um, Love working here. It's really a pleasure every day just getting to see all the new things that we're working on, get to be hands-on in helping all of these nonprofits, making sure that their databases are up and running, solving some problems, um, and doing really fun things like this, like teaching classes and being able to offer some advice and some best practices on how you can get the most out of your Bloomerang database, and reach your constituents in the best way possible. But outside of Bloomerang, I'm just like a normal person. Like my profile says, I enjoy music a lot, biking, and of course, I've got a dog and a cat now. I should also add her on there too. So if you do happen to hear some barking in the background, it's probably just UPS or someone's dropping something off of my house. So the remote work life for everybody here. And just to make sure you're in the right spot, we are going to be talking about designing engaging emails in Bloomerang, and we're going to be focusing on Giving Tuesday that will be coming up here pretty soon. So here's the agenda. We first want to talk about why emails get results, why it's important to even send an email or an update to your constituents. We're also going to talk about some design tips, look at a few samples, maybe some do's and don'ts, as well as some best practices for email, what works, what doesn't work, what's allowed, and what's restricted in HTML mass emails. And then we're going to jump into my demo database, and I'm going to show you how to build from scratch a fresh new design that will work very simple. But just so you can see that it's not impossible and it doesn't take forever to build a good looking email, but it can just take a little bit of know-how, a little bit of patience, but ultimately you can knock it out pretty quickly. And then also share some email and design resources. And we also have some bonus content that we'll be linking to this class as well. So let's talk about mass email and Giving Tuesday. So we've had some classes, and we're going to have some more classes coming up about Giving Tuesday in particular. But mass email is a tool that your nonprofit can use to help generate excitement and participation in your events and goals. You can think of this as like a teaser. How can you leverage your mass emails to get that excitement, get people wanting to click on those emails and get them to participate in whatever action you're wanting them to partake in, whether that is donating or whether that is attending maybe an online event, but pushing them and kind of encouraging towards that goal using mass email. One thing to really keep in mind is to decide ahead of time who your target audience is. So do you want just everybody in your database that has an email address? Or are you looking at a smaller segment? Is it going to be people who gave last year or gave to a specific campaign? Or is it someone who interacted in a certain way in your database, perhaps went to a certain event or used a certain sign-up form? So there's lots of ways you can find the data and find those audiences in your Bloomerang database. And our support team is happy to help you build those reports and get that exact audience you're looking for. And one main thing we'll be really focusing on today is how to have clear steps, how to keep your emails simple, and how to make sure that the action step is clear to your constituents and your potential donors. So whether that's a link to donate, a peer-to-peer page, or even a social media post, deciding what you are wanting them to do with the email is very important, and keeping that as the main funnel point for your mass emails. And just some overall design tips for mass email is to reinforce your message, the limitations of HTML. One thing I want to talk about with limitations, it's just knowing what mass email is and the tools that are available to you. So, for example, things that are safe to use in mass email would just be text and images, web-safe fonts, which all come included in Bloomerang mass emails. Things that you'd want to use caution, such as like a wide layout or very large images. So things you want to be careful with when you're sending mass emails, and things that are prohibited and restricted by mass. It would include embedded audio, embedded video, JavaScript, custom, even iframes. I know it's a little bit into the more technical things, but ultimately there are certain limitations of HTML that you'll have to keep in mind when you're designing things. So if you're thinking, oh, I would like a video to play right in the email, embedded video is just something that's not going to work with Bloomerang mass email, let alone any mass email tool. It's better to host that somewhere else and link and push your constituents to that video you're trying to share. And these last two points are so important. Keep things simple and design with a mobile device in mind. Most recipients and most people will view an email on their mobile device nowadays. So it is the majority. So it's very important to make sure you're testing emails and previewing it on a mobile device to make sure it looks okay prior to that mass send. Readability. Let's talk about this. This is an important part of design tips. So in today's world of the constant connectivity, you don't have a whole lot of time to make an impact with your email marketing. So as you all may know, you probably get hundreds, probably even thousands of emails a day. And so it's rare for someone to take the time to read an entire email from the top all the way to the bottom, especially a mass email or a marketing message. We've all been there. And I think it's really important to make sure you don't have any blinders on, and they kind of, you put on the hat of, if I was to receive a marketing email, how much would I want to read? How much would I want to go through before I decide, okay, I've got the gist of it? So you have to understand, if your subscribers are interested enough to even read the subject line, let alone click on the email, it needs to be very clear, very efficient as to what they are needing to get from your mass email. So clear headlines, call to action buttons, bullet points, all those can help increase that scannability. And part of that scannability is the ability to read through the page. So here's just some quick bullet points. Is you want to move readers' eyes across the page. So you want to have no more than 2 fonts. Many times you have multiple fonts. We're talking 4 or 5 fonts. It can look busy. It can look overwhelming. It draws focus away from items you're trying to maybe have the constituent focus on, as well as a good color palette. 3 colors is usually a good reference. Any more, and it will start to look, again, too busy and a little bit too much to look at for someone just trying to scan through quickly of an email. Keep links obvious. I do recommend using the button feature a lot in your emails, making sure they're, 1, able to be seen if someone's scanning quickly, and 2, if they're on a mobile device, it makes it a lot easier to tap that with your finger versus trying to select a particular word that's hyperlinked in a paragraph. Keep stories and calls to action short and also few. Having 20 stories or 30 paragraphs in a newsletter, while it may seem like you're trying to get that information out there, it tends to be too much. So you want to simplify and shorten. The purpose of an e-newsletter is, it's really no longer to provide all of the news or lots of news, but it really needs to be looked at as a reminder for your supporters of why your nonprofit is doing good work and how to inspire them. I always tell those that chat in that rather than adding all of the information to a mass email, keep those links short, keep just a few calls to action, and then you can host the larger story on your website or your social media page. You can always direct them to another place to view those stories, so they don't have to get everything in the mass email. Here's another great rule of thumb, is the 60-40 text to image ratio. So as the old saying goes, pictures are worth 1,000 words, but you don't want to rely too heavily on images. So an entire email should not just be composed of just images. I see the mistake of nonprofits where they might scan a flyer or a poster that has lots of information on it, and then just post that one image in the email and be done. While it may seem like a quick idea and a really easy way to get all the info in an email without having to design everything, the downsides are spam filters will not like an image-only email, so you run the risk of having that email land in spam. Also for accessibility readers or those that rely on having the images have alt text below them. If you're only using images in your email and those are disregarded or not loaded in the email, then suddenly you have no content. So you want to make sure there's at least content outside the images where the message is still clear and still able to be to get across to your constituents. And I do recommend using alt text for images. And I'll show you where to place that in the email designer. Not only is that good for ADA standards and for accessibility, that can also help when someone is searching through an email or just trying to reference your email. That alt text can help bring that up in a search. And for images, some other quick bullet points. This is a little bit more Bloomerang related, but we recommend you use Chrome. Firefox is also a great browser to use. Those two I would recommend when you're using Bloomerang's email designer. It tends to work best with those browsers. If you are going to be using a full width banner in an email, I would keep that pixel size between 500 and 800 pixels. There is a size limit on the image itself, but as far as allowing it to load quickly and look good and professional in the email, I'd recommend 500 to 800 pixels. If it's a 2-column layout, then I would recommend that each of those images is about 265 pixels wide. You can always resize them a little bit. And then for thin wide, try to use images between 165 for the thin column and 375 for the wide column. Okay, I want to show off a couple examples of not so great practices and good practices for e-newsletters particularly. So this doesn't really pertain to like a donation receipt or like a confirmation email, but more or less an e-newsletter. So here we have an example from 2014 from the National Parks Conservation Association. And you can see that the main idea is, it looks like they're trying to make their newsletter a recreation of their website. You can see it as all the links at the top. It almost looks like a website at the very top. I mean, there's links that are honestly hidden to me above that top banner image. And then you can see there's a sidebar on the right side with some blue links. Below that, there's a 3-column layout with looks like 3 stories. And you can see it will scroll down. This actually would be 1 long column, but then you can see there's actually 3 more stories. And then there's some action buttons, looks like some take action as well as learn more is underneath all of these. And then there's also some more links below. So this isn't, I wouldn't say this is bad, but I think there could be some improvements. To my eye, it looks like it's quite busy. It's hard to understand what the main area of focus is for the reader. Do they want them to donate? Do they want them to look at a particular story and feel inspired? Or are they wanting them just to get a general update of the good work that they're doing? So it's a little tough to say. So if we jump ahead a couple years, so here's an example of the same organization from 2016. And you can see there's some improvements. It's no longer looking exactly like their website. Things are a little bit more simplified, a little bit more brought together. So notice that while there's still some links to the top, they're a lot more clickable. There is the only orange button is the donate button. So that draws my eye immediately that might be one of the main actions they want you to take. But I would say you can see that the top thing that is taking up the most space is this featured parks slideshow. So they are wanting to show that off, as well as the top stories, as you can see on that right side. I like that all the buttons are the same color, the same format, keeps everything uniform. It's able to be scanned pretty easily. I know the gist is they want me to see these stories, and I can click on these to take further action. So it's not boring, even though it's simplified. It's uniform, and it's easy, fast, and skimmable. So we're going to jump into a sample of designing an email in Bloomerang. We're going to look at the layout and structure, so how to set up your email to make sure it's going to be able to hold all your design elements. And then we'll look at how to insert and edit the images, videos, buttons, and social media buttons. But before we jump into that, some quick things. Best practices before you even get started is deliverability. I would highly, highly recommend to set up your SPF record for your organization. We have a help article right here that will walk you through the entire process. So you can see that here's an explanation of why it's important. Essentially, it is authenticating your email domain to be sent through Bloomerang service. It will increase your deliverability rate, make sure emails are not going to be landing in spam. This is something that you will have to do on your end. Unfortunately, our support team is not able to do this for you, as it requires access to your DNS, your domain name services. But pretty quick process. It's not too technical of a task, and it can be done in just a matter of minutes if you have that access. So I would check out this article. It should be linked with our content, but this is a great step when you are getting started with email and mass email and Bloomerang. And we're also going to look at previewing layouts and also sending test emails, and we'll get into that when we start this process. So the second part we're going to look at is these resources. So we also have so many help articles and so many references in our knowledge base as far as to help you get started. And if you feel stuck, there's plenty of options to read up on editing your email content, any of the structure and settings. I also wanted to point out these Giving Tuesday resources. These are new. So we have some talking points and some key messages that you could add into your Giving Tuesday mass emails. I realize not everyone might be participating in Giving Tuesday this year. You might have perhaps a more localized event or another ask event that you're going to be pushing your constituents towards. But in any manner, the language and the talking points and some of the samples that are included in those toolkits are great resources to pull into your mass emails, just to make sure that you are using language and using images and certain messages and wording that's going to get your point across in the best way possible. And here's the rest of our content resources that will also be included in the links after this class is over. All right, so let me jump into my demo database. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. All right, so first I want to show off a completely finished product. So here is the end goal, and I'm going to show us how we're going to get there today. So notice that I have just for the most part, a one-column layout. So I have, it could be an organization logo up here. For now, I just have Blossom. And then I have a button here to get a full update, as well as some more buttons. Here's some action steps I included, video link, and then here are a two-column layout with some more action steps, some social media icons, as well as here's the contact information here at the bottom. So before we get started, let me talk through all of these tabs. So I'm going to open up a new email, show where we're going to get started. And right when I click on this email icon, you'll notice that there's email templates, engagement surveys, and email settings. We're mainly going to be talking about email templates today. I just want to show off this email settings real quick. This is where you're going to find your email interests, your deliverability settings, and if you were to send a MailChimp mass email through Bloomerang's integration, that would be found here to set that up. We're not really going to go over any of these in depth today, but just so you know that where those are located. Engagement surveys, we'll save that for another class specific on that feature in Bloomerang. But for now, I'm going to click on Email Templates, and I'm going to click New. Notice we have some starter templates here. We have our main starter templates. We have some that are centered around COVID-19. Notice that these are, they include language and just some pointers and some inserts that might help you just get jump started in anything that might be related to COVID, such as canceling an event, or if there's ways to reach out for volunteers or a postponed event during this time. So these might be some great resources if you are needing to reach out concerning the pandemic. I'm actually going to go back to just one of our regular starter templates here. Any of the designs will work, so find one that the structure looks like it will hold what you're looking for, but all these can be edited pretty heavily, pretty much down to bare bones. So in this case, I'm going to select the simple constituent one. And notice at the top, there's design, filter, and details tab. So real quick, I'm just gonna click on details, and we'll need to set up all of this real quick. So you can see all these, anything that's in green is required. So in this case, I'll just call this September Academy class. For the purpose, I'm gonna select newsletter. Email interest, maybe I'll do newsletter. I'm also gonna do update. You can see my other test email interest down here. And allow blank merge fields. So if perhaps I wanted to include a merge field that not everyone would have information on, would I want those people to be skipped, or would I want them to still have that email but have that merge field blank? So this by default is unchecked, but you could check this if you so desire. So this is everything on the back end is on the left side. On the right side is what your constituents are going to see when they receive the email. So the subject line could be anything you really need. We don't accept emojis. Notice I have one in here for testing, but emojis in the subject line are not really recommended working through Bloomerang. I do recommend the subject is something that is catchy, something that is going to be able to deliver the message you're wanting to give to your constituents, but also being fairly broad in nature. So in this case, I might just say big updates. And I'm just gonna put Scott, and I'm gonna put my work email address. Okay, this is the filter section. This is where you can build your audience. And so in this case, I have a constituent filter applied. I can change this to household if I so desire. I can also change the filter type. So if I would like to change this to transaction or interaction to include transaction data or interaction data, I could do so here by clicking one of these options. For now, I'm just going to leave this as constituent filters. So I'm going to be starting with a list of all my constituents that are active in my database. Notice this is including those that don't have an email address, and they'll get automatically skipped as we preview the email. So if I wanted to, let's say, only reach out to those that had donations, I could click add filter, and let's say it has transactions maybe from, let's just do from 2019 and on. I could do specific transactions, and then below transaction filters, I could click date. And how about I go from between January 2019, I could leave the second one blank for today. This can pull all my donors from the past 2 years in. So that's how you just add a quick filter. All right, now let's go to the design. So for this, I'm going to just remove these rows. So you can see as I notice there's 3 tabs over here. There's a settings tab, a rows tab, and a content tab. Mass emails in Bloomerang are comprised of content, which would be these elements in the middle here. So here I have text and here I have an image, and then they're held within a row where you can see this larger area that you can see down here where it is labeled as row. And I also have another one down here. In this case, I actually just delete the entire row if I click on the row and then select the trash can. And now I'm essentially starting with a blank template. So to recreate the newsletter we had earlier, I'm going to drag in some rows. I like to think about these as containers to hold all of the information. So really, the more the merrier. One common mistake that I see with some nonprofits is try to put everything into one row. Rows are helpful to allow mobile devices kind of know where to place content and where to make breaks as well. So it doesn't hurt to kind of separate things out into new rows and allow yourself to have that more flexibility. So I'm going to add in just a few rows that are single column. and I'm going to add one of these 2 column rows. All right, and to recreate this, I'm going to just drag an image content block up here at the top. I'm going to put a couple text ones below, and I can put a button under here. What I'm going to do is September newsletter. Now, one design tip is, again, with the font sizes and overall in your email should try to match. So in this case, if I'm making a header, I'm going to make this 18, and I'm going to bold it and center it. So anything that I consider sort of a header, I'm going to keep that same format. And I'm going to insert just some filler text here for the time being. And I'm going to center this. Notice right here I have a merge field. You can just type these in real time. If I want to do asterisk with curly brackets within formal name, this would populate with the recipient's informal name. If I wanted to add another merge field, I could click more and click insert merge field. And I would get a whole list of merge fields I could add to this email. For now, I'm just going to keep informal name. And now let's change this button. I just click on this button, and I'm going to put read the full update here. And notice once I've clicked on this button, I have content properties here on the right side. So here I could add an action for this button. Let's say if I wanted to go just to our website. I would recommend for all links to add the full protocol. So notice here at the beginning, this will ensure that any device will recognize this as a link, and it will be able to be clicked on. Otherwise, you might get a little bit of variation with how that's going to behave. So it's always best practice to make sure you include that entire protocol, which includes the HTTPS. So anytime you're grabbing a link, just make sure you're grabbing everything from the beginning. And for these button options here, I can also change the background color of my button. So for this case, I'm going to change it to our kind of Bloomerang green. I can just add my hex code in here, and now I'll update. You can also just click on this square to get a color picker. And I'm also going to bold this just so a little easier to read. There we go. All right, next I'm going to add just a little divider. And I can also click on this divider and add some, let's see if I want to make this a solid line, for instance, and I could even adjust the width. So maybe I just do about 75% of the way across. And now let's add some text below here in this new row. I'm going to add a couple. And I'm just going to copy these over from my previous one. Again, I'm going to keep the same format. So I'll do, whoops, I had 18 earlier. So 18, bold, and I'll do centered. And I'm also going to copy this paragraph. If I need to make bullet points for, here's a good example. Notice this is not matching up here to 14, so I'm going to make this sure this is 14. Here we go. I can just highlight this and then click this bullet list. I might have to just backspace and hit enter on each of these. There we go. One thing I do recommend, even for quick things, this is small tips, but even if you have like a bulleted list like this, just increasing the font of certain elements can help that readability. So for instance, if I wanted to really emphasize some key words, just adding a little bit of bold will help. There we go. All right. I'm going to add another button below here. Perhaps this is going to be something about supporting their mission. So maybe I'll put support our mission here, if I can spell right. I'm going to bold that as well and change the background color to that green. Oops, yeah, it's not the same green. B300, there we go. Okay, we're getting there. Oh, we got to add our header image up here. So what to do here is click on this browse. This will pull up your file manager. I'm going to click on my files, and I can click on my editor images here. Looks like I have all kinds. There's Blossom. I also have Buzz Lightyear. And click insert. And if I want to reduce the size, I can click on the image. And instead of auto width, I'm going to bring this down to about 300 pixels. There we go. All right, and below this, I'm just going to show how to add that video thumbnail. So I can click on content here. I'm going to drag this video content into this row. And then click add a video URL. So here I'm just going to pull up our YouTube channel. If you paste directly from YouTube or Vimeo, we'll automatically generate a preview image. So notice here is a preview thumbnail, and it's going to automatically place that triangle play button over the top of it. I could change that to a rectangle or a round outline or a square. In this case, I'll keep the rectangle. And I can make that a little bit bigger if I want to. I can even change the row color of just this element. So if I wanted to maybe have this video stand out a little bit more, perhaps I'm going to just change this row background color to maybe like a nice lighter gray. And I can even add a little bit of padding around the image. So if I click on the image, now I have content properties again. And if I add padding on all sides, notice it's going to shrink down just a little bit. So that's a little bit more matted in the middle of this row here. So when someone clicks on this play button, it's going to take them right to this YouTube channel to view my video. Now let's add these two columns below. So I'm going to click on the content again. I'm going to drag two images here. And then I'm going to place some text right below. Notice when I drag, it's going to have a drag it here. It does matter where it's going to be. Notice this is going to be in a separate row if I keep it here, whereas if I drag up here, it's going to be directly below this image block. And I'm also going to place two buttons below each of these as well. There we go. I can browse for images. One nice feature with our editor is I click search free photos. You can get public domain images. So let's say if I wanted to look up volunteer. Let's see, I could just find this image of the world perhaps. And then I can click insert. And same for over here, if I click browse. Let's say I want to, here we go, I have my photo here. Now, one thing that does come up that I want to show off really quickly is these mismatched photos. Notice how these are a little off. It looks a little bad that these are not quite the same ratio. What we can do is use the image editor to change these to the same ratio of an image. So right now this looks like it's a little bit more of maybe a 4:5 ratio, and this might be a little bit more like a 16:9. So let's say we just change them both to about a 16:9. So I can click on this image, click apply effects and more. And then right here, if I do crop, notice I have these ratios up here at the top. And this does in fact look, it's very close to a 16:9. So I can click apply and click save. So now that's edited, that's shrunk down just a little bit. And I'll do the same for this one. If I click on this image, click apply effects and more. I'll go to crop, 16:9. Now these will both be the same ratio. Now you can see those are side by side. Now these all line up together. So what I can do, I also need to add another text image down here. Let's just change this to volunteers. There we go. And again, I'm going to keep that same format. So since this is more of a header, I'll do 18, I'll do bold, I'll do centered, 18, bold, and centered. And then I can also add just some filler text for the time being. Okay. And once again, my buttons. Maybe we'll do just, I always encourage that for these buttons to keep very active words. So when you are creating action links, try not to just use learn more or click here. But adding an action to it, such as sign up today, is helpful. And I realize I have all caps for all these, so I would do sign up today, keep that bold. And the same thing for this one. Perhaps I would do register today. Small changes might help people click on something if it's better than just click here. Okay. And for each of these buttons, I will need to add a link. So never forget to make sure that there is an endpoint for that action. So in this case, you might put your website URL or maybe an event form here or your Bloomerang donation page. All those could be linked. Okay. Last, we're going to add some social media icons. So I'm going to click on this content, grab social. I'm going to drag it here in this bottom footer here. I don't like this. These are all different colors. So what I can do is change the select collection, the icon collection. I'm going to change this to a dark gray circles. I'm actually going to change this whole row. One thing to keep in mind is the contact information. In accordance with the CAN-SPAM Act, all mass emails need to have your organization's information on it and unsubscribe options. So this will be locked in. Notice when I click on this block here, it's going to say this content is locked. So while I can move this to another area of the mass email, I can't just outright delete it. So one thing I can do though is I'm going to change the background color of this just so it stands out a little bit more. So again, I'm going to just change the row background color to that light gray again. I'm going to drop this down. Notice when I click on the social icons, now I have my links and I could insert the handles for each of my social media profiles. So I would just do Bloomerang Tech in our case here. And maybe I don't want LinkedIn, so I can just delete that from here. I can add a little bit of spacing in between them. And I really just want some padding on top, maybe not on the sides. So what I can do is click more options. And then here where it says top, if I click top padding, now it's going to kind of center this up a little bit more. So now this footer looks a little bit nicer. Okay. And just like that, we have built an entire mass email relatively quick. I know we kind of zoomed through it, but this is just a quick overview of how you can add some elements and a few design tips on how to make sure these look nice. All right, so some other helpful tips. One is always to save your work. So I'm going to click save and keep editing. All right, so now it's saved as my new Academy class template. And notice these tabs right here near the top. I have my Ahern audit. So if I click on Ahern audit, I'm not passing, I'm using filler text, so it's not going to pass either of these, but we have the U test, which is a great way to make sure that your mass emails are donor-centric, that ideally you want to be using twice as many U's as we, so you want to keep the focus on the donor and on their actions they should take, as well as the flesh concave. Right now, again, using filler text, it's not going to be at a good level, but you want to keep it between a 6th and 8th grade reading level. If it's too lofty of a reading level, if it's above 8th grade, it can be hard to read quickly. If it's below a 6th grade level, it could probably use some improvement just to make sure you're getting the right point across. And you can read more from these links provided here. I highly recommend clicking the Send Test button. Here you can send up to 3 emails to anybody. Could just be another colleague, someone outside of your database, just to check how it's going to land in the inbox, what the subject line is going to look like, all the links are going to work correctly, and as they should. So I highly recommend sending test emails. And this is a very handy feature, is the preview layout. If I click on preview layout, I'm going to get a very quick idea of my email. So for example, I could see that this is going to, on a desktop, these 2 columns are going to stack next to each other. Everything else can be in this one column. Now, if I click on mobile, since these are fully mobily responsive, see, notice one thing right now is that I have this a little too wide. And so it's going to not quite fill up the whole screen, but notice that those 2 columns are now stacked on top of each other versus side by side. This makes it a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier for a mobile viewer to click on these buttons. And you can see that my social icons instead of to the right are now below. So if I want to adjust this width, I can click this X. If I go to settings, notice I have my content area width to 500. So I can reduce some of these sizes if I needed to. So I could increase this by a lot all the way up to 900 or bring it down. In this case, I'm going to bring it down to about 480. And now let's see if my preview layout has changed. So it's probably this button right here that's causing a little bit of issues. So again, this is why it's important to test. It's important to preview, but making sure everything looks right in that preview layout. Overall, I'm happy. Since we've gotten this done in about 10 minutes, I'm pleased. But the main part is that I think with this email, it's very clear where you need to be making your actions, whether it's this video, whether it's these buttons that are all uniform. So I highly recommend that you follow some of these design tips and try to apply them to your emails that you're building in Bloomerang and get exactly what you're needing. All right, so once I'm happy with my email, I can click Save and Preview. And it's going to process for a moment, and it's going to give us a quick summary of the constituents that are found from our filters, how many of those constituents had an email address, and how many were skipped. So if you see emails that are skipped, notice that 10 of these were skipped. I can click on the Skipped Recipients tab. And here on this tab, I'll see that I have some that have bad emails and some that have opted out. So if anyone of your constituents has decided to opt out of emails, they will not be eligible for a mass email through Bloomerang. And what's really handy is this tab, the Design Preview. So this is going to be appearing and populating with the information of your constituents. So notice this one's going to go to Greg Brady, and I can see that that merge field for the informal name is working correctly, and it's going to pull in Greg's name. All these links should work in this page as well, so you can click on these and make sure everything is directing to where it needs to go. I can cycle through the first 100 of these just to see how they're going to look for my recipients. So you won't get a chance, if you have thousands, you won't be able to really see a preview of every one of those, but you can at least get a good idea of most of your emails. All right, and once you're ready to send, you can click send, and then you can either choose to send now, or you can schedule for later, and you can schedule a separate date to go around that time. We try to give about 30 to 40 minutes for a mass email to send. It does depend on the size of the email that's going out and what's queued up. But generally, that mass email should send within about 30 to 40 minutes of this time that you've selected. And it should be set to your user's time zone. Okay, and that is about all we have for as far as content today. So I know we have about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to try to go through some of the questions we may have or go over anything else. I know I flew through a lot of content in today's class, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to go through and see any that Diana hasn't already covered. But yeah, feel free to chat any in now, and I'm going to read over these real quick. Okay, is there a place in the email settings to autofill your social media handles, or do you have to add handles when you start a template? Yes, great question. So it will be saved in the template, but when you do start a new email template, there's not a spot for those to be saved. So in this case, in this template, if I was to have all of these as Bloomerang Tech, this will be saved in this template alone, but they will not be pushed over to other templates or update any existing templates. So those would need to be added manually, and I would recommend just double checking those prior to sending out any mass email. How to send an email. I also see those in the Q&A section too. I'll get to those as well. How to send an email as a donation acknowledgement. Can link to an event registration page. Great questions. So yes, you can use our mass emails as donation acknowledgements. For that case, I would recommend you would need to change the filter type to a transaction filter. And if I click change type, it's going to remove any filters in here. But now notice I'm going to be starting with a list of transactions versus just a list of constituents. And then what I would be doing is building my list of transactions to acknowledge. So just like a report, if I only wanted to pull in those that have an acknowledgement status of no, and maybe from, let's say the date is last week. So I could send a mass email to these 6 transactions to acknowledge them. In order to flip their acknowledgement status from no to yes, I would need to make sure that in the details tab that this is no longer set to newsletter, but it would need to be set to acknowledgement. This is the only purpose that has function behind it, in that it will change a transaction's acknowledgement status once they receive that email. Great question. And as far as linking event registration page, yes. You could add in a link to really anywhere, whether it's a button. You wouldn't be able to have the event page inside of the email, but you could link to wherever that is being hosted. Okay, let's see. As far as ones that have not been answered yet. Yes, alt text. I don't think I actually covered that. Great question. So, well, we did talk about it and why it's a good practice. As far as adding that, if you click on the image, right here underneath the URL of where it's being hosted, here's where the alt text is. Really, alt text should just be a simple description of the image. So in this case, I could just do like blossom icon, maybe gardening. And there we go. And if I had some others down here, maybe perhaps I click on this for volunteers, as well as I want to click on here. I can also make these hyperlinks. So if you wanted all of your images to be clickable to send them to another location, I just need to click on that image, and then notice down here, there is an action section, and I could choose for it to open a web page. I can have it send an email. I can have it pull up their phone app or their text app on their device. And I can have that, or I could even link another file, such as like another PDF or another document. So some other actions you could take in an email if you like to add that into your mass emails. Yeah, inserting a PayPal button or even a Bloomerang donate page button. So for those, you could just link to an existing button. So if I wanted, let's say this one to be donate instead of support our mission, I could click on the button, and then here under action, I would do open web page. So as far as maybe giving through PayPal, you'd have to figure out where that would be hosted. I would assume there would be a URL that you could insert for the PayPal button. As far as a donate page, you could just insert wherever that's being hosted, whether if that's on your website or if it is just the default form that we have. So let's say if I pull up my test website here, then I could just insert that right into the link. So now that button would be linked to my donate page. How can I determine if another user set up the SPF already for us? Great question. So one thing to notice when you do use the from email address, if the domain that is being used does not have a SPF record set up with Bloomerang, we will replace it with our mailman domain, which will allow that email to get sent past some specific spam filters. But in order to check your SPF record, what our support team tends to do is we look up the domain on Mail Tester. That's a great resource anyone can use. So mail-tester.com. And then here at the bottom, there's a SPF and DKIM check. And here you can look up any domain. So in this case, I could look up Bloomerang. If I click check, here is our SPF record. I know to some it might just look like some random string of text, but here I can see is the record. And the main thing, especially with Bloomerang, is that it includes SendGrid. That is the service that we use to queue up and send mass emails. So I can see that for Bloomerang, we're set up, so we're good to go with include SendGrid. But you would need to check. What you could do is go to this website, enter in your organization's domain, and then see if that is being set up. If not, then I'd recommend walking through that step. And here's that help article again. We even recommend Mail Tester in this help article. And right here at step 3 is where you would begin if you need to set up a new one. So I'd highly recommend looking through this help article. It gives you everything you need to check on your own SPF record and how to update it. It will vary depending on the services you use. Many people go through GoDaddy to purchase their domain. You might get it through another service, and the interface and the settings and the menus you might have to go through will be a little bit different, but the main idea of it will be the same. The main process will be the same. Yeah, purpose of alt text. So again, it's there to, one, for accessibility reasons. So if someone uses like a screen reader, that would allow for images to be read back to them with a description. So having that alt text there would allow for screen readers to be more accessible. So that way the images can still be coming across to those recipients that need that. It can also be helpful in web searches and in email searches. So if there's a particular image that has alt text, that can be searched upon now if they were to search through their inbox. Yeah, let's see. That's a great question, Heather. So we do have another class, actually another class that I taught that is specifically on setting up and creating mass emails. This one was a little bit more into design aspects, maybe the helpful tips of making these look nice. But as far as just creating and getting started with emails, I would recommend checking out that class. It's also just about 45 minutes long, and it walks through what SPF is. It walks through what the filters do, what the details tab really does. So I would recommend checking that class out. And as always, you can chat our support team. If you click on this question mark icon up here and click live chat, you'll get one of our real extremely helpful reps that will walk you through any question you might have. Great question, though. Yeah, Adriana, I'd be happy to look into anything. If you want to chat our support team, or you can even email us, we'd be happy to look into anything that might not be working with the email editor. Yeah, I can happy to. I know SPF is kind of a whole other ball game as far as outside the email design scope. So if you do not set up SPF, will the email still send? Yes. So sorry if I was unclear earlier. It will still send. However, it will be replaced. So notice if I was just to put like a gmail.com. So notice as soon as I enter Gmail, it's going to give me this warning saying this may cause deliverability issues. So to help your email get to the inbox, which is the end goal, what we will do is we replace the from email address. And so instead of this being scottmoran@gmail.com, I would replace it with my organization name and notice it's going to be at mailman.bloomerang-mail.com. So this is our authenticated domain that we would be sending on your behalf. So the email would still go out. It would just not be from this address, but rather it would be replaced with this. So it would not restrict the email use at all. It's there to make sure the email is not just going to go to spam automatically. But the best thing to do is to set up SPF. If you plan on sending emails out of Bloomerang, I would highly recommend it. That way, one, you're making sure you are properly authenticated forever. Once you set up once, you're done. And two, you're going to make sure that you get to use the email domain that you have purchased and that you would like to use on your mass emails. And yes, the change would happen automatically. So if you're using specifically like Gmail or Yahoo or bigger email providers like those companies, we will automatically replace. If I use another domain that is not authenticated, when I get to that preview page, I don't know if I have one off the top of my head right now. Let's see what this does. All right, so here's a great example. So notice that the from email address is now swapped from, instead of being scott@email.com, it is now replaced from Scott. So it still has my from name, but the email address it's coming from is now going to be mailman.bloomerang-mail. And there's even this link here of why my email was replaced. And this will take you right to our help article for why emails were getting replaced and what you can do to fix that. So this is a precaution for us. We noticed that we had many organizations that did not have properly authenticated emails. And so we were losing a lot of emails to spam. And that not only hurts your organization, but that also, as just Bloomerang's reputation for sending mass emails, it's important that we protect that reputation for everybody. And so replacing that with an authenticated email, think about SPF as putting a return address on snail mail. If you were to get a letter on your mailbox that had no return address, it would look a little fishier than if it had something where you knew where it came from. So essentially setting up SPF is having your organization put a return address on an envelope. That way when your recipient opens their mailbox, while yes, it was handed to them by a USPS person, they know that while it's being handed on behalf of somebody, the return label is showing where it's coming from originally. So that SPF record is that return label. And it's there to make sure that your email is not going to get tricked into going into a spam filter. So this replacement's there to help you. And again, just by setting up SPF, you will fix that and you'll be all set to use the email domain that you have. And yes, the email at the bottom will always be your organization email. That won't have anything with the from email address. So that information will stay intact no matter what. Great questions. I know SPF, this is a new feature for us. We rolled this out a few weeks ago as far as this SPF checker and having this in place for all of our mass emails. So I know it's a little bit of a new experience for many. But again, our support team is happy to answer any questions and walk you through any snags you might have in setting that up. Any last minute questions I'd be happy to go over. I know we're right about 2:30, so I think that might be for our time today. Okay. Lots of questions today. I hope lots of answers too. I really appreciate all the participation today. Again, we'll have more classes in the future that you can sign up at our Academy page. And feel free to look at the links that are provided. Thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate it. Be safe out there and have a great rest of your week.